Hi, welcome to our build of a 60-inch wingspan Avanti Pattern Plane. In this video I'm going to be attaching the tailplane and the fin onto the fuselage. But before we can do that, there's a couple of things that we need to do, and that is to check that it's got a nice seat to sit on, to be glued onto, and so that we get it nice, square and true. Now the tailplane sits on here at a 0 angle of incidence. That's shown on the plans, so that's good. It's always good when that information's on the plans. And this is the datum line. The top of the fuselage former here is the datum line we take as a central line for that angle of incidence. So what I want to do as a starter is just make sure that that's level, that's parallel. And so I've put a spirit level on there, which it's not quite at the moment. I just need to adjust that a little bit. And I'm also going to be measuring from the top of the fuselage there and bringing it right back to here on the turtle deck, just to make sure we've got a nice parallel surface to work with. The next thing I want to do is make sure that the tailplane itself, when it's sat on there, is not going to be at an angle, so that both sides of the fuselage are actually level. And I'm going to do that by putting on this piece of wood, or I might get a slightly longer piece of wood, and I have checked that it's actually straight and true itself. And then I'm simply going to be measuring the height of that on either side. At the moment that works about almost 10 millimeters higher on that side, so I need to just sand a little bit off here. And I'll do that at probably 3 locations along here. In fact, actually no, the tailplane comes from here to here, so I'll do it at 2 locations. I'll do it there and I'll do it back here. Once I make sure that that's sitting on nice and square, I need to think about attaching the actual tailplane and how I'm going to measure that I've got it square and true once I start gluing it. Now I can measure, as I know this is level, I can measure the wingtips off the table because it's all parallel to the table. So I can measure the wingtips to make sure that it's, even though I've leveled this, with the glue it might just tip over slightly, so I can do that. And I will probably put a support under each side for when it's gluing to make sure it really does stay and doesn't drift off when I let the glue dry. The other thing is to make sure that it's square to the fuselage, or at a tangent to the centre line of the fuselage. And to do that I'll be doing just the same as I did with the wings. I've got a piece of wire with a hook on the end, and I'm going to be hooking that into this recess here, which I've checked is square across the fuselage and the same distance from the sides. So I know that's a good reference point, and I would simply mark up, I'll probably just mark it to that tip there because that's a good tip. That's not so well defined, or even the corner actually in the elevator bay may be a better line. So I will just mark that up there, and I will do exactly the same on that side, so I can tell that it's square to the fuselage. And just one final thing to mention, or actually no, 2 more things quickly. I noticed when I put this together that this tail fin, which I made before I'd finished the turtle deck, was slightly low on here, and I didn't want to add anything onto here. I didn't want to remove this, so I've just added a piece of 1/8, sort of 1.5 mil balsa wood here for that tip to sit on, and I've also put it under the fin there and there. So I'm basically just lifting the fin up 1.5 millimeters so that now is correctly aligned, and that's not going to make any difference to anything. So other than it'll look a lot better and actually smooth in nicely. Once I've got that fitted, I've got these angle pieces which I've just very roughly made, which I'm going to need to fit into there, and then these I need to trim them to length and bring them down to meet the tailplane. So I'll get on with this now and make sure that this is nicely level, square, everything, and get this tailplane glued on. I think I will probably do the tailplane and the fin together. In fact, I will glue the fin in place, check that's square, use my steel blocks to make sure that's right, and then I will stick this on as a whole unit. I think gluing the tail fin into the tailplane first is definitely the right way to go. It's much easier to control it while it's like this than it would be on the plane itself. I can sit the tailplane on the bench nice and flat because it's essentially a flat tailplane except for the leading edge and the edges, and then I can slot this in, slot the fin in, and just make sure it's square using these blocks I've got, these steel blocks, which I know have square edges, and so I can just prop them up either side once it's glued or once I've put the glue on, and I can of course check it with my set square to make sure that it's correct. So once that's nicely dried and set, we'll get this set up on the fuselage itself and get it glued into place. Right, well, I've now got the plane set up on my table so I can fix the tail assembly, the fin and the tailplane. Now I've got a steel block here which I've set the back of the fuselage on, and as I said, I've set that datum, that zero angle, well, what the datum line we're taking the angle of incidence from, I've set that level, both the spirit level and by measuring it. I've fixed the fuselage in place with these blocks and the wings. I've also put the wings on so I can use the wings for comparison with the tail. Now what I've done, I was going to set this up and just measure from either tip and have done with it, and also I was going to be measuring from inside the cockpit to this corner here inside the elevator bay. Well, I've still done that and I've set that up, and that is correct, nicely positioned, so that is square in relation to the fuselage. What I've done slightly differently though is I haven't set the tailplane up necessarily so it's parallel with the table surface. What I've done is I've actually put the wings on and I've eyed up the tailplane so it is exactly parallel with the wings. If I measure the tips here, I find that this is slightly, I think this is 1.5 mil different to that side. But I think it's more important that the tailplane is parallel with the wings so that they sit parallel, rather than trying to set this parallel to the table and then finding out it's slightly different to the wings. Having it in parallel in relation to the wings is the most important in my mind, because that's going to denote how it flies. And if I just concentrate on the tail plane and forget about the wings, I could end up with it crooked, which we don't want, and it won't look good either. So what I've done is I've made some little lifts just to get the right height, and what I've done is I've just a platform of balsa with a balsa plinth, and then I've got a T-pin in the top, and what I did is I put them under, gradually move them until they were just right, just in line, just parallel, sorry, with the wings, and when I was happy that these were both absolutely correct, I put CA in the top of the balsa so it's going to hold the pins in place and that won't move. As you can see here, I've also put some weights on top of the tailplane just to hold that nice and solid and in place. So that tailplane now is quite firm. Oh, and incidentally, there's two T-pins, I don't know whether that'll pick up on the camera, in the very front of the tail fin, just as it comes to the rear of the turtle deck, one either side, just to make sure that that's aligned centrally and it doesn't move off. So I think I've got another weight in here just to make sure that all this is firm. So the upshot of all this is that the tailplane is parallel to the wings, which is what we want, and the tailplane is square to the fuselage, which is what we want. And I'm happy at that now, and I'm happy that I can glue that, and that isn't going to move. It's going to stay where I want it until it's glued. Now, whoops, the fin I glued in with PVA, but the tailplane I'm going to stick on with epoxy, purely because there's no slotting, there's nothing. It just glues flat down on top of the fuselage, and I would rather have something a little bit stronger there because there's going to be quite a lot of pressure on that tail. So PVA wood glue would probably be fine, but I'll feel better with epoxy. So I'm going to get on and check that now. It's 30-minute epoxy, so I've got time to take this off, glue it, and then just get that right again as it sets. Well, I've now got the tail assembly glued in place, and the final thing is to fill in these sides. So continuing the line of the turtle deck and just bringing that down to the tailplane itself. What I've started to do is I've just made some pieces of balsa that are quarter round, and this one on this side I've cut it to length, and I've just gone round with a pencil and I've drawn on the underside there and along the back and just around here, and it's a really snug fit. I've cut that to fit, and we can see there I've got the line, I've got the line here that it needs to come down to for the tailplane, and the line underneath. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to profile that and get those into place. I'll leave it slightly proud at this end. I think it'll have to fit more or less at that end, but I'll leave it slightly proud here, and then I can use one of my sanding sticks just to make sure that that's a lovely smooth finish. I'll probably take off the side first and then bring this down. So we'll come back and have a quick look at that when I've done these. This one, of course, still needs cutting to length and marking up. Well, I was planning to shape this before I actually fitted it, but having it in place like this, it's not actually glued in place, but I think by sanding it while it's in place, I can get everywhere I need to get. I've brought this straight down, I brought this straight down, and it's actually profiled in quite nicely. All I need to do is put on this curve here now and feed it into that turtle deck. And I think I can do that better with it being in situ rather than trying to do it, keep fitting it, trying to do it, keep fitting it. So this is probably the better option. I didn't think at first I would be able to get in to be able to do that, but actually I can do the sides, I can do the top here, and I can profile this round nicely. I just need to be careful with how I sand this and not sanding that too much and not straying off onto the stringers. I might put a piece of masking tape around there actually just to protect the stringers so that I don't inadvertently sand them. In fact, I've got some magic tape which I will put on now, and that will just give them a little bit of protection just on that edge. It's amazing how strong this is. I used this when I was doing the wings and fitting the wings, so now I can sand that and get that into shape. Right, well there we go, that's finished now, that's smoothed in quite nicely and just follows that line of the turtle deck. Lovely. It's really exciting to see it starting to take shape, and now with the tail assembly on, but it is an added danger. As I'm working on the fuselage now, I have to be very careful of these tips as I'm moving the fuselage around because I don't want to damage them. I must say, which I haven't said already, is that prior to fitting the tail assembly, I did actually put in the slots for the hinges and tested those out. I didn't cover that on the video because I didn't really think it was necessary. I've covered it lots of times in the past on my videos, and so I thought I would just save time and not go through that. But I'm using Mylar hinges, which are just slotting in like I've done on the Das Ugly Stick I did and the J3. Anyway, I'm going to draw this video to a close now. Oh, just one final thing, and my caveat as always, it still needs a final sand. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you find this useful, and we're almost getting ready to the end of the build now. I'm really quite excited about how this is starting to take shape.